Hello everybody. So, just checking where I need to be. The description's obviously a little bit wrong this morning because StreamYard, where I do the presentation, that you think the wrong thing, is it doesn't let you edit once you've set them up, which is really annoying. So it's been quite hard for me to keep track of what's what. So today's session is protecting the wood. So it's module 5, looking at finishes. So that's what we're going to be doing. And next week will be finishing touches, wrapping up on all the other bits and bobs. So that's what we're doing today. Let me just strip back to where I am. So yes, as you can see, I've managed to move the piece along quite a bit, necessarily because the finishes are going on. We've got to have quite a lot of the rest of it done, including things like the shellac and all the touching up and etc. So I've done as much as I can so that we can go through the different applications. Now, obviously, because I'm just doing one project, I'm going to be doing one specific kind of finish on it, but I'll demonstrate a couple of other techniques on some boards actually, because it just makes most sense, because I'm not going to demonstrate 5 different types of finishes on one piece that I might like to sell afterwards. I need it to look consistent. I did sort of flirt with the idea of maybe using a couple of the different finishes that give a similar effect, but I thought it just caused me more trouble. And the problem with adding finishes, you probably have to strip it off to actually get it out the wood properly. So I'm just going to play it safe, but I'll show you through the different finishes available, and chat about that. So yes, I'll go through all the different types, and then I'll go on to some application methods, and all of the different finishes, top coats, varnishes, whatever you are used to referring to, sealers, I think some people say. All those different products I have put in the supply list based on my own sort of awareness and experience. So there's lots and lots of products, and there's lots to sort of cover up here, but I'm going to try and simplify it down and distill it as much as possible. And there's an element of personal choice with it as well. So, and I'm not a scientist. This is just what I've gleaned over time, and enough to sort of get me by so that I can make decisions about what finish to use. I'm going to share with you also a comparison table, which will have them set out. I've got a board here that I'll be going through, which I've been using over time to see how things look over different surfaces, and also how they age and how long they last. And then, so I'll share some images of that as well with you close up, and then there'll be a comparison table. So because there's pros and cons of each really, and I think it's weighing up the pros and cons and deciding which is best for you. And so this is what works for me. This is my opinion. I've got some fairly strong opinions on not using certain products for things you're going to sell. But it is personal choice, and there's room for you to decide what look you like best, how you like to apply something best, and what kind of products you're happy to work with. So, but if you're not sure about any bit, just follow what I do, and then you can always explore later on. But hopefully, by looking at the stuff that I have used, will save a lot of that sort of trial and error of trying to get to grips with products that might be difficult to apply or a bit sort of tricky in application. So at least you've got something that you can rely upon if you haven't sort of set off in that world before. Let me just put on the side. I don't need to interrupt it. Oops. Okay, so there are lots of products out there, as I'm just going to grab a tissue, as ever. Lots of products out there. On the floor. Actually feeling like I had a bit of a cold this week, so I'm taking vitamin C. So more sniffy than normal. So I'm going to go through the different types of finishes, the different types of products. But like I said, the comparison table will give you something to go back to if you're sort of struggling to sort of make sense of them all. But I just wanted to do a bit of a tour, really. So feel free to ask me questions or any clarifications, and I will do my best. Let me just see. Yes, that's right. Notes for this one because there's so many bits to it. So let's make a start. I'm over on the table here, so maybe we'll just pop this camera on so you can see all the products lined up that I have. That's a bit weird. Let me just. This is why I put my other maps over there because this one's a little bit intermittent. Oh, I've just realised it says Amy. Let's see that Nikki asking about Amy's piece. I think once you work on something concertedly, it certainly does go quite quickly, but when it's spread out in bits, it can feel like quite a long time. I don't know about yours, Amy, but I've still got the legs to do on mine. I've still got to do it upside down and clean it. The legs and the inside, and then the framing around behind the drawers, which is quite tatty. But yeah, hopefully I'll get in there. Okay, so mouse is working. I was going to put the close on. So. I'll probably pick this board up because the camera won't necessarily pick up the colours, but actually in this particular session we're looking more at the wood than we're looking at over paints. But it's quite interesting, particularly for people who are new to furniture recycling, who've not encountered the different kinds of top coats at all, just to see it, but obviously we're not focusing on that aspect. So it's just actually the products here that I wanted to go through. It's a bit of a prompt to me. Oh, my coffee. The coffee's not finished, from the different sort of finishes that there are. So I've kind of arranged them into groups, essentially, basically on, let me just see if it's better to go full screen on this and then I can be in it. Oops.Maybe, baby. Okay. Don't know if I can be in it, actually, just my hand. So I've arranged them into groups just to try and make it sort of a bit simpler. And here I've got a representation of lacquer because I don't have any lacquers other than spray lacquer, but things like cellulose lacquers and etc. You'd probably use a proper airbrush type spray setup with a compressor and everything, or be even on industrial level. So it's not something I tend to work with except for a little bit of maybe spray lacquer on something decorative. So that's there. And then next to it we've obviously got the shellac here. And because those are all shellac based and their solvent is alcohol. So it might be denatured alcohol like methylated spirits or other kinds of alcohol. I've just got the surgical spirit there which is alcohol, but because I can't find the meth. Gone wonders. So we've got this group here, which is based on shellac, which comes from a secretion from an insect, effectively. So it is a sort of a natural byproduct, and it's mixed with alcohol. It's mixed with other solvents to make the lacquer that, like the sprayable lacquers. And as a family, they are. I'm going to pull you back to me because it's not very interesting, is it? I'll just. As a family, they are. They give a really good gloss. To put my notes here because it's going to be. Ooh, yeah, on my camera. But they are incredibly. So the lacquers, because the lacquers are spray finishes, they're incredibly high VOC, which is volatile organic compounds. So those are the toxins that basically they're going to go into the air, and so we would have to wear a mask, and we'd have to make sure that we've got sort of good ventilation or respiration. And so they are toxic in terms of what they're releasing into the environment. And so that's why I'm not really going to cover lacquer today in that respect, because it's something I just think as small producers that we wouldn't really necessarily get involved with. There are better things for us to work with. Plus, there are better finishes that are going to give us a harder wearing result than lacquer. So we've been using shellac, so we've talked about that and we understand a bit about it, but we're using it to penetrate the wood and give us that sort of va-va-voom in the grain. It isn't a necessary step. You could go straight from sanding your wood, cleaning it all up and just putting on a top coat. So one of the other products, you don't have to use the shellac, but we're using that to allow us to pair it with a hard wearing top coat. So that makes up for the sort of the deficiencies of shellac and shellac based products, which is that they can crack and they can split and they're not as hard wearing. They can also bloom when they get wet. So they're older finishes. Obviously shellac is the base of French polishing. So they're older finishes and we've got more high-tech finishes. We're going to go on to the next group. And so that's why I'm pairing the two together. And then the third group is actually where you could just go from your sanded wood straight to this product and you would get the enrichment in the wood and protection at the same time. But there are other downsides. So this is where the comparison table will allow you to sort of make a considered choice about, what you prefer. Ultimately, you might decide, I can't bother doing shellac and a top coat. I'd rather just use one of these other products that does it all in one. And I don't mind if it's a bit smelly or you can't paint over the top of it. So it's just the weighing it up, really. So we'll sort of go through it. So shellac, usually fairly, lacquers are usually fairly glossy finish. Same with sort of French polishing. So that's something that would normally be sprayed, like I say. So we're not going to go into that too much. And then obviously French polishing, they're using like a rubber to sort of pounce out the finish. And again, it's something it's a long time process, to build up that thickness. Lacquer can be sprayed very thick, built up quickly. And then shellac has to be built up in layers to get that a fairly solid finish. So it's just something that we're not going to really want to do at home. I think there's better ways of building a protective finish. So that moves us on to, let me just see if there's any questions when I move the camera up. Bring you in. There we go. So what I've got here to sort of represent the next group is, I'll move that out of the way actually because this is some little jazzy pouring thing that I have. So this is my personal top coat here. So this is General Finishes High Performance Satin, personal choice. Sorry, it's not my personal brand or anything. And this is a polyurethane. So this is a polyurethane, which is an acrylic resin, basically. So it does come from a sort of a plastics world, but it's a plastic that has no negative impact on the environment in the same way as we sort of think about as plastics. And in fact, it can actually have a positive impact on the environment because it's so durable and so hard wearing, it keeps things in circulation for longer. So it sort of saves energy in that way. Particularly, as you can see here, this is the water-based version of polyurethane. This is here to represent oil-based polyurethane. So there's two kinds of polyurethane. Top coats. I would stick to using the water-based just for the more pleasant to use. It's more, it's easier to apply, but it's also not toxic in the same way. So a lot of these would be very low VOC, so those toxins that escape into the air, or some of them none. Whereas your oil-based one is going to have the same issues as some of the other products where it will have slightly higher VOCs, and you need to be careful a little bit more with washing up from things like this and being careful of things being flammable. So there's two versions of this. There's a big difference between them in that a water-based top coat, I'll come back to me. Is that me? A water-based top coat is going to be your most clear, translucent way of finishing a project without adding any colour. We'll come on to sort of ways of maybe stopping your wood darkening, which is the natural product of adding a finish over it. As soon as you add something, it's like wetting the surface. It's going to pop back the colour. So it goes from that dusty, mellow look that a lot of people like, and then it goes darker. But it's not the product darkening. It's just because it's sort of bringing back the colour. But your water-based polyurethane, like your general finishes, is the closest you're going to get to a clear, translucent product. There are other polyurethanes out there. This is one of the toughest ones. And I just find it the most easy to apply. So check the supply list for other ones if you're looking out for them. I don't use the oil-based polyurethanes because of the length of time they take to dry, because of the fact that they need to be washed up with white spirit, which means your brushes and your rollers and that kind of thing. And very often, that can be quite tricky. So it can be quite a sort of, it causes a lot of waste in that process. Plus, oil-based products like that will take longer to dry. So again, that's something that's going to slow down our processes, like say why we don't French polish at the end of our projects. The oil-based products that like the polyurethane and the oil-based products that we'll come on to in a second, say for example, it might take 6 hours for one coat to dry, whereas your water-based which will take, could be 30 minutes, before you can put your second coat on. So if you're doing 3 to 4 coats of your protective coat at the end of a project, that adds up if it's 6 hours, some are even more. I've got one here that's just the Fusion Stain and Finishing Oil, which is, it says 2 to 4 hours, but it does say cure time it's ready for use, dry to the touch after 9 hours. So ready for use after 3 days. Whereas a water-based top coat, you could be touching that after several coats within the same day. So obviously it's got some benefits for us in terms of nice to work with, easy to dry. So you can see where I might be going with why I would use a product like that. It does have some drawbacks though, as a product. So I was saying everything's got pros and cons, and that's where the shellac comes into the process that we've been just making sure you get the top of my head. The shellac comes into the process because of some of the drawbacks of a water-based top coat, and that's the fact that because it's water-based, it doesn't penetrate as deeply into the surface. I can't really tell where I'm looking. It's much easier over here because I used to look at the screen. It doesn't really penetrate as deeply as an oil would into the wood, which creates that, or the shellac does, creates that drama and brings out the different tones in the wood. So this isn't a problem if you've got a really nice pale, like a blonde wood, or a wood that's quite plain. Using your water-based top coat isn't going to create that much of a difference in its appearance at the end. So you could just go from sanding, cleaning that up, getting the dust off, and then adding your clear top coat on, and it would deepen a little bit. You remember the white spirit or methylated spirit trick of seeing what it'll look like before you put your top coat on. So it will go a little bit deeper, but it won't look that different. Whereas if I was to put my high performance top coat on over this lovely walnut here, and if I did a side-by-side comparison on 2 doors with just the water-based top coat and then an oil-based, my top coat with the water would dry up to the surface as the water evaporates out of it, and it leaves a film on the surface, a protective film of this acrylic resin, which is super durable, but you've lost that enrichment. It's not like dramatically lost, but it does, you can see it sort of get lighter, and it's quite disappointing. Whereas the oil will sit in the surface and it will stay there and really bring out the colour. So that's where the shellac comes in really. It allows me to use a more durable top coat as well as getting the drama, instead of using one of these other products that I'm going to come on to, which are incredibly popular. A lot of people are using them, and I think I'm going to show you them because it's honestly, it's down to you. But I think there's some drawbacks in terms of using them for products for sale, in terms of the upkeep of them, and the fact that there's not as much flexibility, because once it's on, you can't really add anything over the top of it as easily as you can with a water-based system, whereas you can keep on sort of adding on a touch-up, or you could scuff sand it and repaint it. Some of the products that have got wax in can make that a bit of a problem down the line. So for someone like me that's a bit of a tinkerer, or changes their mind, or thinks, I just want to put a little bit of, there's a little bit less room for manoeuvre. So, but like I say, it's personal choice. I'm just checking in on you. And then what we've got over here, excuse me, this group here, I think I'll bring you off there because I don't think you can see. There's quite a few more products down here than there is at this end. There we go. So we've got, as well as my oily cloth, we've got some polyurethanes, which is your synthetic resin-based top coats. And then what we've got is, so you've got your oil-based products or oils, and some of these are hybrid products, and some of these are processed oils, and some of them are natural oils. So first of all, I've got here a series of Danish oils. I've also got Fusion's stain and finishing oil, if you've heard of that. So these are, as you can say, caution, attention, flammable sign. These are oils that have been combined with varnish and other solvents to make quite a tough finish for an oil. So it dries to a finish. And then we've got over here, but all of them are going to be needing to use white spirit to wash up from. So they'll penetrate deeply, but they do have that sort of flammable aspect to them. So I was using these brushes yesterday. I actually left them in the sink overnight because rags and etc. with oils on, any of these products here can just self-combust. So these are some of the health and safety aspects, not just of the toxic side of things you need to be concerned about. Whereas over here, General Finishes, I leave my sponge that I use for top coating in one of these containers on the side all the time. So there's that peace of mind, especially if you're working at home. Like I said, it's personal choice. So you can see here we've got some tinted stain and finishing oil there. There's different colours available. There's some tinted Danish oils here as well, so you can add colour. So when we talked about staining before, we can still add colour towards the end of the process with quite a lot of these products. And so the difference here, we've got also, let's move that out of the way. We've got some natural oils. So I'd say they're not processed, but they are processed in that they have to get them out of the actual thing, the hemp seed. I'm sure there's more in that than just oranges, but there is orange oil in it. And then we've got things like linseed and tongue, which are all natural oils, even coconut oil. These are much more pleasant to use, just like using olive oil, I suppose. Nice to use, often have nice smells, can be scented, etc. But they've not been treated in the same way as these products, so they don't provide a protective finish, and they don't last as long, and so they will need replenishing in time, and often quite quickly because they'll oxidise, and so in terms of providing a finish for a product for sale, I would say definitely not. Because they're not adding any protection. They're adding enhancement and nourishment, but not anything against wear and tear. So if you're wanting to use an oil, something like a Danish oil is very well used within the woodworking industry to sort of protect the wood, because it goes in to the wood, they all absorb in, it goes into the wood, but then it creates a sort of slightly tougher finish, which is more waterproof. And it's this particular one is UV resistant as well, so that they can be quite durable products to use. They're just a little bit smellier to use and take a bit longer to dry. So perfectly worth looking at these products if you're doing pure wood projects, particularly exterior projects as well. Things like floors, obviously, within the house. I just tend to steer away from stuff like this if I was doing a design. If I'm doing tape designs, that's where a polyurethane, I think, is better for protecting a design. It forms a film across what you've put down. So whether it's decoupage or stenciling or masking tape, it forms a film layer, hence why I call it a top coat. Whereas these sort of things will penetrate in and can create a little bit of a sheen on the surface, but would not necessarily protect anything else that's on the wood. Okay. So, here's my fingers. So these, I don't use these very much anymore, but I'm going to show you some of the differences on this board that I've done. And then moving on to waxes is the final family. Now these also sit within the white spirit family in terms of needing white spirit to sort of wash up and deal with anything you've put the product on. So they sort of come together. And so I've got some fusion furniture waxes here, so that's a dark one. And these are with these are beeswax. So they're all pretty natural products. And wax would be applied with, I've just got a really awful little brush there because I don't really use wax personally. But you could use a sponge, you can even rub it on with a cloth, but it needs to be worked in. It's quite labour intensive. Or you can use a really big brush and work it into the wood. However, it doesn't actually change the colour of the wood. It slightly darkens it, but it doesn't penetrate in the way that an oil would, because it's going to just go into the surface and sit on the surface and create it effectively creates a barrier. And that's my problem with it. Because once you put wax on, you can't put anything on top of it because it will literally repel anything on top. So it's going to cis or lace, if you've heard of those terms, where you put it on and it starts to roll back and it doesn't actually sit. So that's your problem with your wax. It's been used traditionally over the top of oils in like mid-century furniture and other kinds of furniture to create a bit of a sheen on top of oils. And so it is a lovely finish, and there's lots of people will still be doing it out there. But for me, it's not durable enough. It's got the same problem as a natural oil in that it oxidizes. So all those lovely scented furniture waxes people put inside the furniture, the smells go and they start to dull. So this is something that people will like with waxes, is that they age and that they look rustic over time, but they don't. They start to look dusty and they don't stop scratching any of these products, so they're not protective. I probably have used these sort of things for doing inside of drawers to nourish them, but again, it does wear off. So now I start to use shellac because it's probably me that gets most of the pleasure out of using orange oil because the smell doesn't stick around, unfortunately. So nice products, but and I also want to go through them with you, but I tend not to use them. And this is another big product in our industry is the hard wax oil. So this is probably one of the most frequently used ones, Osmopolix oil. There are other ones out there. I think the original was Fides hard wax oil. There's Liberon as well. And this is, I'm now regretting buying such a big tin because I just don't use it anymore. But I have used this on mid-century furniture where I'm purely doing wood, and you can see this in a satin finish. All of these come in different finishes, and also tints as well with the Polix oil. But being a hybrid, it's a hybrid of an oil varnish and a wax. So it's been engineered for floors. The idea is it absorbs into the surface of the wood. It's meant to be used for bare wood. It absorbs into the surface of the wood and it seals the wood, but it moves with the wood. And so it does have a layer on the surface. I'll pick this up in a second and we'll have a little look at it. But it doesn't create a hard layer in the same way as a polyurethane does, which is, think of it like a plastic layer, which can, with the wrong circumstances, it can crack if it's sort of badly flexed or in really bad temperature or damp, what have you. But so the idea is that Polix oil will flex and bend with the furniture, with the floors, for example, but it doesn't provide that layer of protection in the same way. And again, my problem with that is you can't put anything over the top of it. So if you're doing touch-ups and tweaking the colours of your wood, it has to be underneath, unless you use a tinted oil across the top. But to try and sort of touch in your little
bits of damage like we've been doing, it's not easy. You could use the wax furniture sticks. That's one thing you could use. But again, this takes a long time to dry. I think the rapid one is 4 hours, the normal one's 6. Might have got the wrong way around. Might be longer for the rapid one. And again, it's going to mean that you've got to wash your brushes in white spirit, which, usually that you just end up throwing them away, unfortunately. So it's got some drawbacks for me, that one. And I'm going to just show you this board. Let me move the camera over. I'm going to hold it up for you so we can actually talk through it. The light. So just pop him back. And come back over to you. There we are. Let's bring this board over. So they're the main groups, really. You've got your alcohol-based, you've got your water-based, and you've got your oil-based. Brain went for a second there. Let's just catch up with some questions, and I'll just catch up with any of the different points. I'll talk about the different methods of application. I think that most of them can be, apart from that we mentioned about lacquer sprayed, waxes are brushed and almost like worked in and rubbed on. The rest, most of them can be wiped and brushed and rolled. I think it's just the very heavy oil-based varnishes, like a varnish itself, you couldn't wipe on, they're too sticky. I think it's worth saying here that varnish is actually a specific type of oil-based finish. It's a specific old-fashioned formula. So I suppose an oil-based polyurethane is like a modern version of a varnish, but it's got a more high-tech resin in it rather than old-fashioned resins. So there's different things, but all of those oil-based varnishes and wax-based varnishes that we've got on the right hand side there are going to amber over time, and they're going to get more yellow over time and deepen, except for the natural oils that actually disappear. They leave a little bit of colour in the wood, but disappear. So I'll show you on this board some of my samples. Is it possible to apply water-based top coat over the top of a water-based eggshell paint? I'm thinking just about paint. That's not wood. Yes, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Water-based over water-based is fine. And actually, water-based over oil is fine as well. But what we need to do is ensure that we look, these vary, all of the directions on the tins, so it is worth checking out. But as a rule of thumb, you can put a water-based top coat over anything as long as it's cured, except wax. So if you wanted to get the richness of the shellac finish with a top coat on, you could put it over a regular oil, like say for example hemp oil, which doesn't have protection, but you would have to give it time to cure before you put a water-based top coat on over it. But water-based over water-based is fine. I don't know why. One thing I would say in answer to that question, which is it's a little off topic, but water-based top coat over water-based eggshell paint. Eggshell is usually quite durable in itself, because eggshell, I sort of think about it as a paint with a satin top coat built in a way, even though eggshell's a slightly different sheen from satin, but it's got its top coat almost built in, and that's why it's a bit more, it's not as sort of grippy as some of the paints without it. It's a bit more plasticky, let's say, because it's sort of self-sufficient, and so sometimes you do primer to help it stick. Even though the top's durable, you need something to help stick it down. So you usually wouldn't need a water-based top coat over an eggshell. You would usually use a paint that needed a top coat or an eggshell. And I think it depends how shiny your eggshell is, but you may need to get a little scuffs on, to be honest. So anyway, we'll just park it on there, we can have a look at that separately. But I wouldn't necessarily do both. I would usually use an eggshell to avoid having to top coat a paint. Let's do. So Sharon is asking what is polyline. I don't know if that's from the supply list or just because you've heard it chatted about. And polyline is a brand, so probably could easily be confused with the type of product because of the poly bit. And it is a polyurethane. They have different types of lacquers. I think I've added them to the supply list. I used to use them. I found general finishes easier to apply. I have included them because I know people still use them, but I probably wouldn't go back to it. I hear mixed things. Some people, loving it, and some people, preferring when you move to general finishes. So, but I know it's a different. It's a bit more affordable and a bit more easy to find, I think, as well. So that's what it is. And Polyline do a huge range of other products as well for decorating and decorative crafts, I should say, not decorating. So Amy's asking, do you use an oil-based stain? Do you have to then top coat with an oil-based finish? I mean, essentially you would, but you should be able to let that cure, and then you can go over the top with the water-based polyurethane. So it's just that you wouldn't put, using oil-based stain. Interesting. But no, you don't necessarily have to, as long as you let that properly cure so the two don't interact. When we say oil and water don't mix, as long as they're not sort of able to mix. And so the different tins say different things. I usually have in my head, as a rule, 21 days for curing across the board, but I see that Fusion Stain and Finishing Oil says 10 days. So have a look at the tins and see, because and obviously bear in mind the same with painting, the humidity levels, and that for us means dampness of rain, probably more than heat humidity, and how cold or hot it is. So that's going to have a bearing on your drying times as well, and how easy it is to get a nice flat finish. I've got a question twice there. Yes, so let's go through this board so you can hopefully see. I'm trying to get it close to the camera. This has been going quite a while, but I have updated it because one of the finishes new finishes coming in that you're using, finishes that they've tinkered about with, which I don't like anymore as a result. So we've got here, this is the plain, the natural. You can see the ply there. I've got, it's just Fusion, so it's fairly matte. Not much of a sheen on it, and then some metallic down there. So this is wax next to it. Now this is fairly freshly applied actually. So over time, you can see it's got a shine on it. You can see the shine on the black or anything else. And it has darkened the trying to work it out. It has darkened the colour down a little bit, but let's just see. Let's just bring the up actually. So I'm going to camera. You can see there's a bit of sheen on the black, particularly catching the light, and it's just feel nice and smooth. But over time, that will start to wear. And you've got your matte poly, which isn't catching the light at all, which is next to it. So it's dead here. So this is matte polyurethane, or flat, as some brands like the one I use call it. So you can get a whole range of finishes. Matte sometimes what we need, sometimes not, but flat or matte are the lowest sheen possible. So I'll go through in a second, just to talk about different finishes. And then I've got a satin poly next to it, you can see the shine compared to that. So I'm going to take a photograph of this so you can get a bit more of a visual on it. I don't know if it was working better flat down actually. Yeah, you see the shine here. Then we've got SFO and Danish oil next to each other here, because you can start to see how the wood is darker from those. So it's actually deepened the ambering of the oil-based finishes, is darkening the wood. Whereas the poly
is much clearer. Whoops, it's clearer here, so it's see-through. And actually, if you could see it close up, the matte is actually quite light compared to the satin. So the satin's darkened a little bit around the matte because the matte has got mattifying particles in it, which are effectively little light particles that bounce the light. So it has actually just steadied the colour a little bit. So it's got a little bit more colour here, and then it goes through to more colour here. And you can see over here, so this is the hard wax oil on the next one. You can see how yellow the white is there. That's how amber that is. That's Pollux oil. So you've got nice colour in the wood, but it's obviously creating quite an amber finish there. And that's the satin. So it's got a similar finish to the polyurethane over here, but you can see a very different look. So if you didn't want your wood to go this colour, you would use a poly. Like I said, you can get different finishes in levels of sheen, and you can also get different colours. You can get wood tints in a lot of these oil-based finishes. So those are in the supply list, and I've linked through to the tints where there are them. So if you get to the end, you think, I've put a coat of clear on, and often that's a good practice. I've put a coat of clear on, and I'm not happy with that. You could then overcoat with a wood-coloured tint to give it a bit more oomph, or if you just needed to alter something, like I think I'm going to do with mine, because you can see my top door there. You see, it looks a bit paler than my other ones, so I'm going to do that approach, but I'm going to do it by creating my own tinted top coat, because these come in very, very clear. They don't come in tints, whereas the oil ones do have tints, because it's hard for you to mix those things yourself. And then we've got natural oil here. And can you see how flat that looks? It doesn't capsulate at all. And that has been on probably for 18 months, and it's almost like the oil has stained the wood a little bit compared to the natural. And no finish look here, so it's a bit darker. But the black is dusty, and it's like there's nothing to put on it actually. And then I've waxed over it just to give it a bit more sheen here, which sort of holds the finish a little bit better, but again will age in the same way. So I'll do a little closer of that so you can see the differences, but it's really good to see the different sheens there. So essentially we're going to have a choice of finish between starting off with things like dead flat and matte at the bottom end of the spectrum, which usually between 5 and 10% shine, so like catching and bouncing off it. And then you go up to something like a satin. There's some ranges that have semi-matte in between. A satin is usually 25 to 35% light bouncing off it. So it's sort of muting some of the light hitting it. And then some ranges like semi-gloss, and then you'll go to gloss, which is where it completely bounces all the light and it's very shiny, which is not really what everybody likes, but that's where your personal choice comes into play. There's just a couple of things to bear in mind, and this will all be sort of able to view across the board in the comparison grid. But I think in terms of bringing out the lustre in things, so in the wood, bringing out all the qualities of the wood, and things like metallics as well. You do want something a bit shinier in order to allow that to glow. A matte product is going to dull down a finish. So it's great if you want to keep something quite soft, you like the dusted, sanded look and you want it to stay that way. You can use like a dead flat top coat. You could use, flat top flat's another one, but I think the range that used to call it flat top flat, I've changed it to dead flat now, but that's another one. Actually, maybe polyvinyl I've got to flat top flat. Or you can use a top coat with a little bit of white in it. Also, we do a raw, which again is meant for raw wood in order to keep that lightened look. So really, to bring out the qualities like this, I want to use something shiny, not shiny, so I'll use satin is where I actually go, somewhere in the middle, so it's not too shiny and it's not dulled down with those sort of mattifying particles, stopping the light shining off it. The other thing to say about finishes is as well as the durability of the actual type of product and how long it lasts, you've also got to consider that from matte to gloss, you've got a range of hardness there as well. So your matte finishes are softer because of those particles in them. They're not quite as hard wearing as a gloss product. Gloss is always the toughest of all. So that's where satin sort of gives you the best of both worlds. And a good practice, actually, if you do want to go down a matte route, is to put a coat of satin down first, or a coat of gloss, in order to give it that durability before you put a slightly softer top coat on, which they do scratch a little more easily. Yeah, so that's just something to bear in mind with the finishes. That the shinier it is, the harder wearing it is, and the longer lasting it will be. And so, so that's why for me satin makes sense for me for products for Sarah. It doesn't look as dusty. It doesn't. Sometimes when you top coat darker colours in matte and sell them off and they look dusty. So satin just looks and stays looking good, and it's easier if people in the future decide to do a little repair to something that I've created with polyurethane water-based top coat, and they decide to either use a touch-up kit that we've provided there, or they just grab some top coat, they can touch it up themselves. If you've used a product like a hard wax oil, they have to use a hard wax oil over the top of it in order for it to, it needs to be a wax product, and it actually needs to be scuff sanded first for it to stick. So, there's some issues there, I think, in terms of long-term manageability for customers. Do you want them to have to be topping up your product? A hard wax oil is intended to be replenished after 3 years, starts to sort of fade and need redoing, whereas polyurethane will look good long-term and stay the same, unless, they do something crazy with it. So that's why it's my preferred option. It stays looking good, customers don't have to top it up. And if they decide they want to paint in the future, it's a scuff sand and paint. If you decide you want to change something which is a hard wax oil on it, you have to get the wax off, so you've got to use wax filler to get it all off first before you can make changes. So if you wanted to add a little bit of extra design, or you want to just change your mind on something, but that's my personal view, and you can choose if you want to finish your piece, sand it all, and coat it with osmopolic oil, and it will look, stunning straight away. That's absolutely your choice, and it may need replenishing in time. The difference is you can't build up any layers of oil either. You can only build up like a hard wax oil. It's like 2 layers. It's not meant to be sort of like a really thick product. A lot of the oil-based products, you will actually put the product on and then wipe it back as well. So it's not meant to form like a really thick layer on top that's protecting things. So that's a bit of a run through of everything, but don't worry if that's sort of a lot. And like I said, I'll put the comparison thing up in the course resources, so you can sort of look up to what your project might demand or what finish you'd like to get. So I'm going to have a quick look, and then I'm going to go on to the application part. Okay, so where am I up to? I've got my pieces ready to go. Some top coat. Let's leave that out of the way for now. Come back to a board in a minute and show you some application over. I've got design. Then I'm going to go over with several of the other products so you can see them in action. So I have got this door has got 2 coats of shellac on, as has this. And I just want to pull you in so you can see. Okay. So you can see 2 coats on. Now mine's quite an orangey shellac. So I don't know if the end I might do a little tinted top coat over it, but I'll see. I'll stand back and look at it all at once. I think once you start thinking something is something, it starts to, you know, you need to stand back and start tweaking. I can see the colour is a bit lighter on this, particularly when it was up there, catching the light. So I might do something like that. So this, I'm going to get a top coat on. It does look lighter, doesn't it? But it might be even a question of getting it all back together and then taking a view on it. So I'm going to do my top coat on here. And you see how it's catching the light a little bit? So and actually a bit quickly, it's picked up little bits from the air. That's what happens when the top coating. You're going to get a little bit of blinding in it, and sometimes you can get little bits of the grain popping up, particularly water-based finishes. And so I just want to, I don't know if you hear it, just want to smooth that off. And then also smooth out any bits where I've got shellac a bit more built up. I just want it to all be nice and even, so that when I put my top coat on, it's nice and even too. It's just, there we go. Now, one thing to say, a slightly related note, if you're going to put masking tape design on this, or a stencil, I guess, stencil, I would suggest you make sure you scuff sand it right back so that it's totally dull, so there's no shiny spots, so that the shellac's in the wood, but the surface of the wood is there. Then dust it really well. You could even just wipe it over with methylated spirits first to take that excess dust off. But before you do your tape design, because you don't want the shiny spots here might stop your design sticking properly. So you just need to make sure you get it right back. So I'm just going to use this is a super fine, ultra fine sanding sponge. So I used a slightly more abrasive one earlier on, but between the coats of finish, I'm going to just use a very light one just to sort of take that back. Take very long. A bit knackered actually. Just with the grain, and I just want to dull it down just to get that nice and flat. So I just need to, and if you need to go, it's like a more abrasive one to deal with any build-up of shellac, because that could show through your top coat, so it's not just get nice and smooth. It doesn't matter if it's shiny, just even. But of course, I was saying about masking tape, it needs to be not shiny. Where's my top cloth? Seems to have lost that. So there it is. So, tack cloth again, the dust. So if you've got more dust than that, you might want to back it, but I'm just going to use the tack cloth very lightly because I'm using a 1 foot oil-based finisher, which is fine if that's what you're using, but obviously I'm not. So I'm just going to be very careful that I not rub it down too firmly. I don't transfer anything off it. But I do find them more effective than water-based tack cloths. But if you're worried about it, have a look for one of those. I think they work by static rather than like a resin in the cloth. Okay, so I'm going to grab my top coat. So I've got this nifty little jug on mine. I don't suggest you buy these, but I just sent these, which sits on top of the can and creates like a little spout, which is quite cool. But it's a good reminder. Just so that's the thing you need to do. However you've got your decanted or what have you, and that's where those big fat syringes that I used for staining are really good as well at drawing stuff out without it getting in the rim of the tin, because
They do tend to get a little bit clogged up and then you can't get the lid back on. So yeah, this has got like a mixer in the bottom, which is stirring. But it doesn't have to be that complicated, just get a wooden stick, particularly if you're using a matte top coat. You must mix it. But satin also has mattifying particles in as well, because all the products start off at glossy end of the spectrum and they add mattifying particles. So this has still got sediments that we need mixing in. Another reason why you might see if you look on supply list, as much as I like little fairs, I think I've taken a bottle of theirs home, but it's a plastic bottle, similar product to this, and I think also another one would be polyvinyl, I suppose, is another one, because that comes in plastic bottles, and also, where was I going with that? Fusion's tough coat. You get quite a thick layer of sediment in the bottom, and those are the mattifying agents sat at the bottom, and they need to mix in. But with a bottle, you kind of got to roll it, but that doesn't really do it. You need to be stirring, so that's why I like tins, because you can get in and make sure it's really mixed. If you pour it out first and mix it, you've still got sediment at the bottom. It is pretty important because you do want those particles to be evenly distributed through the liquid, otherwise you can see them. If anybody's ever top coated with matte over black, that's what you're seeing, those streaky bits. But generally, and I know that when my top coat is in here, needs topping up with some fresh, so when it starts to look a bit cloudy, it's because of all those particles sitting there. It's not so bad over wood. Wood's much more forgiving than over paint. Like a dark colour particularly, which shows it, all the bits in it. That's one reason why also I have extra little pots of this stuff, and I might actually use it here. It's just ever so slightly picked up some wood dust, so it changes the colour, so I keep that separate, and I wouldn't use this then for going over paint. But I definitely do recommend decanting it, so I've got little takeaway containers, and that's perfect for like putting an applicator into to apply it, like using a wipe-on method. So there's basically you can either brush it, wipe it, or roll it. And that goes for most top coats and varnishes, really, with different application methods. And really, I think I'll do it the way I do it, but you might find that you're more comfortable doing it a different way. So I am I'm going to do it both ways though, and show you, because one can be a bit easier over a large surface than others. At least I'm not sneezing. So, different applicators out there for applying stuff. This is what I've just found. It's a fusion stain and finishing applicator, which is pretty good. It's a sponge covered in like toweling, but it's very stiff and the corners are quite not very helpful. This is what I use these days. I just found these around searching Amazon, and I quite like them because they're quite square for wiping on my top coat. So you just effectively like you're wiping like a countertop. That's not a great one. I might have to get a fresh one out because I've put it on the table, which has got sawdust on it. But that's a sponge covered in a microfiber cloth, and you just get a nice fine finish. And I'm going to build up light coats. So it gives you a nice smooth effect. Some people use like a car polish sponge, which is a very fine gauge hole sponge, so you don't want like big holes. Baby sponges can be quite small, I think. Not what I know about these things, but being a bit of a geek about stuff. This is something I used to use a long time ago, so you might find this works for you. In fact, I've actually cut that in half, but it's fairly fine gauge sponge. It's just a normal washing up sponge. And then to use like a little pop sock over the sponge part, and then you get a really nice fine effect, and you don't get any bubbles. That's one of the drawbacks of using a roller, for example, even like a foam roller, is that you're going to get bubbles. And with a lot of these, they will level out, but you might find they sit and they dry like that, and you might get a bit of texture
Generally, your oil-based finishes will level out and flow out better and lose that texture, but you might actually see it in a water-based finish. So the wiper method is the smoothest. It does take a bit of a nap for not squeezing too much out and just having enough to flow on so it doesn't run out as well. So it's just building up that practice, but it's filling up the sponge but not squeezing it while wiping, I think. So let's do that. I don't know how put some of this old stuff in that I'll put some. Whoops. I did try to get the lid off this yesterday, but it didn't come off, so I'll make sure to put some other stuff in. I've got a vision of me throwing that across the room, so I'll just put some more in. So just a little bit at a time, particularly with the water-based things, just the same paint, because it's going to it's going to be contaminated for starters, as we've just said, and bits come under it, but also the water evaporates, it gets thicker. So just do it in small quantities at a time. And then do this, so I'm just going to dip it in, and then I'll dip it and run that in because that end's got a bit of stuff on it when I've used it before. I am going to get a fresh one because that's got good bits on it, which I don't need to be trying to get off later. Let's see if I can find another one. Right. Another one that I think is relatively clean. So you can just throw these in the washing machine, but I must admit, unless you wash them up really quickly, they can get a little bit crusty. So I often just wrap them up really well and keep them in the tub. You don't have to keep them in the fridge. You just keep using it. It can last a lot longer that way. So I'm just going to, it's first time use, get it a bit soaked in. Wipe off the excess so it's just sort of not much on it. This is lucky actually because it sticks off the table, but the other ones I think I would actually put it up on something so that you're not touching the table itself because any drips. And it is quite fluid, so you have to really watch the drips when you're doing these things. And stand up and just. So I'm not trying to put too much on. We're going to build up at least 3 or 4 coats, but they dry so quickly. So now I'm going to go back in for some more because I don't want it to run out. And then just watch that end that's touching the mat actually. And then there's a little bit of overlap there, so just go over the top of that. But I won't mess with it too much. We can use our sanding pad in between coats if we need to smooth it. So try and catch that up there. Okay. I'm not going to play with it too much. You see, it's almost like just wetting it with water effectively, it's so thin. That makes it so easy to apply. Whereas your heavier oil and wax based varnish type products do need a little bit more care with application. So then what I do is a lot of, I'll just make sure I've got that there, checking around for drips, that it doesn't stick itself to the table. And then, I missed it there, haven't I? Just very briefly do it on there. The first one, just like painting, the first one will probably won't look particularly shiny and it'll start to build up. And if this was on raw wood, the first one pretty much soaks straight in. So if I had done any staining on my piece that maybe had an area next to it that wasn't stained, I would actually top coat it first, separately. So if you've done any touch-ups like I've done, but you haven't used a top coat, I would consider just giving them a little bit of a brush of the top coat first before you do a full wipe over. Similarly, like I said, I've done a stained pattern on there, I would first top coat that rather than wiping straight down, because I'm going to wipe the stain off. So anything that's not sealed, seal that separately, and then you can wipe across the whole area together. So that is already drying, as you can see, which means I can give it a quick light sand after, and then put another coat on, and I can be doing that, quite quickly. It still takes time to fully cure and fully harden, which means all the water to evaporate to make that solid surface. So like that rule of thumb, 21 days is where it's going to be at its hardest. But it's touch dry already. That's the advantage over one of the other more smelly finishes. But if you're impatient, it might be. But it's still so just much easier and more workable. Especially for a massive workshop where you can just leave stuff all over the place. So then I would just, if I'm going to do a large area like this, what you could also do is use a roller. And then smaller areas, I would just literally use a brush. So this would be, and again, just watching what you're doing in terms of, so this bit here, I've had 2 coats of shellac down there. I'm going to move these actually. Still not finished the touches that come in there yet. This one's a little bit interesting to show you. You can see there's 2 marks there. I think I've whacked it with something, and that's actually taken the shellac off. Or scratched into the shellac. The shellac, as I said, is quite a soft finish. It's not going to stand up to lots of banging about at that thickness anyway. So I'm going to recoat that with shellac, and then I'll put my top coat on. Because if I do it now, I might end up with slightly different coloured patches where the top coat goes in there, and it might end up being a bit lighter. So just if you do find you've got any shellac that gets scratched into it, just recoat it. So this bit here, just do all that, but you can actually do it with the little pad, like that. But then you've got to watch for the excess of the edges here, so it's showing where it's white down the edges, that needs to all be sort of wiped off and wiped back, because otherwise it could just sit there as like a hard lump, which is not what you want. But it's really, really easy to apply. So just look out for drips. But it doesn't sag in the way that if you've ever used a gloss or oil-based kind of like gloss paint, you put a lot on, it just sort of starts to ooze and move. It drips, but it won't sag, it will stay in place. As much as possible. It's even more comfortable to try and top coat on flat, but of course we've got areas where we have to do it sort of sideways on. So let's just do the top. Yeah, I didn't end up staying there again, just 2 coats of shellac and they look kind of fine. There was that much colour in the shellac as it was. Anyway. So I'm thinking of putting a little bit of tint in the top coat for that one. Yeah. What do you think? So this one, let's see if I can get you a bit more look. Oh, yeah. A little bit too high. There we go, you can see how that's looking now. I've still got a tide mark, but not so bad. And I do have some damage here. If you can just see that. Which I'm actually just going to ignore, but maybe touch in, I don't know. It's just here, there's like a, I think it's a mould mark or something, anyway. I haven't quite managed to get that out, but the difference isn't so bad. This is orangey and this is more mellow, so I don't know if I might just use a little bit of tint in my top coat and just do the front part. We'll see how that looks, but that needs sanding back first. it all needs to be. And of course my grain is going that way. So if you've got a long top, check which way your grain is, because you might have to do it across the way, whereas mine's doing it this way, because even when you're wiping, the first coat will look really, really flat, but as it builds up, you may start to see little lines from where you've applied it. And it's similar, the roller, so I still think go with the grain. So it's not so bad with this, because it's very, very fine. You can see little bits of blended in my shellac actually. Just about, because you sometimes get little tide marks in the shellac where it has dribbled itself. Just have to even that out really so it doesn't show through the next layer as it goes to the translucent. Look, there's a big puddle of shellac there where it's obviously dribbled off my roller, so I'm just going to knock that right back. Bear in mind the colour is in the wood, so we don't need to worry about there being an even layer of shellac across the top. It doesn't matter if it goes right back. What I don't want is any little sort of pools of shellac on the top. Take that bit of the grittiness off. So we do this between every coat and top coat that you do. And not the last one, just stop until you get to the last one. Because obviously it's taking that shine off. But you'll find it just gets smoother and smoother, and so if you're using like a hard wax oil or a Danish oil with the colouring on this, I've done it before. I've had sun bleached wood, and I've just used a colour oil here and a normal oil there to try and bring the two in together. I'm going to try and do it for the top coats, but I am putting my top back on it. So, but I actually like that darker colour there, so do I have a bit of dark to here. Just to help tone it in. So what I would probably do is grab, not that one, grab my, let's find it. Yeah, maybe a bit of walnut or tobacco. I suppose this is a tobacco tree, isn't there? There's a plant. So looking at maybe adding a little tiny bit of that literally into my top coat. So let's just do this on the poof actually, because I want to have a look at the other products before we finish. Alright actually. What I don't want to do is rush into putting a colour on that and then put it back together and thinking I quite liked it a bit brighter. So I might just keep that colour for now, put it back together and decide if it needs a layer over it. But if I try it on here, you'll see what I mean. In certain lights it seems to match the doors quite well, so I'm like, whoa, hold your horses. Let's find my can opener. And let's not do it on there as well, let's just do it on So I'm just going to pour it over here. Just going to pour some top coat in. So same stuff, just pour it all over the roller handle. Where have the rollers gone? Oh, there. these are old and well used, so they shouldn't be fluffy. Biggest thing. That's not very helpful, is it? And because you can sort of knock this back and it's really thin coats, and you can build it up, you shouldn't see a layer, she says. I've never done it to matching with top coat. I've usually done it over one whole, the whole thing. And I've put a piece back together and thought, drawers are different colour from the other ones. Not by my own fault, just because it's different wood. And so you can change the whole colour or do it to accentuate to add shading to the front of the piece, using tape design again. But to do it along the line, let's see. You get to see the sort of theory of it anyway. And what's the worst thing? Let's add it on. So I'm just going to put a bit of it in really to create my own tint. And you could do this with universal tints as well. It doesn't have to be the wood stain. I'm hoping it's the right kind of colour, but I want it to be quite sheer. I don't want it to be solid, obviously. Let's just give that a stir. And I obviously want it to be quite dilute to start with, and then I can always keep adding. I've done that on the sideboards before. It's like, it's quite dark actually. But the way to solve that is to grab something, a piece of wood. I haven't got a piece of wood to hand. It's going to have to be this big piece of ply, and just have a look at it. An example of it. Right. Add a little bit more top coat just so I can take it a bit steadier. So it was literally only like a 10p piece squirt of stain in there. So obviously this is where water-based stains are going to give you greater flexibility for mixing them together, but also mixing them into top coat. And the good thing about this is I can keep on twiddling around with it because each thing is compatible with one another. It's not like I've added a product and then at the end of the road. So some oil-based and the hard wax oil finishes will not want you to go over the top of them anymore. I'm going to do it with the roller, just because it's a big surface. I was doing a long top like that, you might have to roll it, but because by the time you've wiped from one into the other, you might run out of top coat. So let's see. So you can see, hopefully you can see a bit of colour going on. So this will give a little bit more texture, but I can always sand that back out. So I'm going to try, I might need, so of course I'm matching it to it in a sort of dusty format. I think it's going to need a bit more brown in it. I can still see it coming up quite red. So maybe I should have just kept it without diluting it further, but I can always add another coat on because I'd like to get to that sort of more sophisticated brown rather than the reddish colour. Yeah. But it might be a coat of that over the drawer there, we'll just help blend it all in. I have to go for something a little bit more, like a bit darker, like the walnut maybe. I'm going to give that a little bit of time. A little light sand and I'll put the coat on, potentially. Perhaps would have been better to put some white spirit on the back bit so I could see the two together. Anyway, you get the idea. It's where you can sort of tweak your colours even when you've got to the end and you've got your final layers on. You're not completely stuck.
Let's have a look at some of the other products I'll just open up for you. Because the applications are a little bit different than some of them, where they're not film forming like this, where I'm building up layer upon layer and just leaving it to dry. Let's just see. Remind me what grit the sandpaper is. A little hard to tell you exactly what grit they are, Amy, to be honest, because I have a huge big box of them, and they're all, I don't know which ones are which. So I would have said this is probably 220, this one. So I probably would have used the 180, 150 earlier on the shellac, and then between the coats going to sort of a 220, and you can go finer than that. But to be honest, I think they get too fine with the synthetic ones. Some people use sandpaper between coats, but I just find it's also nicer to hold than a piece of sandpaper, but you don't get as obvious a scratch. 220 abroad, yeah. But mostly they come in fine, super fine, ultra fine. So that's the sort of range you're looking for if they don't actually have numbers on them. Because although they've got grit numbers, they're not it's not the same toughness as the sandpaper, so it's almost better to think of them as fine and super fine. It's a lot to go through, and it's also a lot to kind of make sense of, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So I say, if it's too much, just do what I'm doing, because I've gone through loads of products and the trials and tribulations of it. So why go through that? Unless you really think, no, I really just want to use that product, or you want to give something a go. I'm all for experimentation. Should all there. When that's dry, you might have a little look at the back and just see how the two colours marry up. Because I want to kind of just totally talk about that, so I think something a little bit left field there. Let's have a little look at this. And then, if you've got any other questions about the other products, if you're interested, if there's anything you thought, I really want to have a go with that. Particularly things that you've seen other people using and maybe curious about, and you wonder why I'm not using it, or how to use it. So let's have a little look at the natural oil. Right, what I'm going to use here, I'm going to use orange oil, purely because the hemp oil, fusion hemp oil, which everybody raves about, and I'm going to be horrible and say, because God, hemp oil is so amazing. It's like, oh no, it's oil that's amazing. And by the way, these oils are oils rather than petroleum oil. They're usually created from natural oils, from nice things. But it doesn't do anything more than any other oil does, really. But it's so it's amazing what marketing does. But it's it's a nice product to use. But it doesn't. I wouldn't sell something with just a hemp oil finish on the wood, because it won't look like that very soon. And actually, I think on that board, the one that's dried out and gone completely dusty, I think that was hemp oil. But the reason I'm not using it today is because that's a sealed bottle, and I don't really want a half a slightly used thing of hemp oil. Whereas I do have some General Fish orange oil, which is made from the zest of oranges. Zest? Peel. So I'm going to use, look at that. So there's a couple of different ways you can add the oils. You could use a lint-free cloth or rag. These are actually General Finishes stain finishing cloths, which are lint-free. But if you can find something like those really nice thick napkins, or old rags that you've got that definitely are lint-free, I'm going to use those.
So you can wipe it on. So this particular product is gorgeous now. And you can use it to clean books well. So a long time I used to use it to clean inside of drawers, so it would bring back the colour, clean it out as well. But I'd go back to something afterwards and find that it didn't smell anymore. So it's nice to have, but it's same with this big mum's butters of the world. It's not going to last forever, but I don't know how long the smells last because I haven't tried them. So this is bits of wood, bits of stained wood, bits of paint of a design that I did, which I'm sacrificing. So with something like that, some people actually literally just pour it on the surface. I do that here, just put it on the cloth. You want to just get it in that section there. But you don't want to leave anything on the surface, particularly over the paint. And you're going to leave it. So it's not really very much more complicated than that. You can pour it on and wipe it around, but you don't really want to be leaving a layer, just wiping it on, essentially. You can brush it on, but you're probably going to put too much product on. It's easy to smooth it around with a cloth. And that's it, really. Leave that to dry and put another coat on if you wanted to. Brush up the colours nicely to make the metallics look nice. It doesn't add any protection, really. It's just an enhancement thing for a short term. You can also get natural oils which are food safe as well. So this is from the butcher block oil. You can get salad bowl finishes and etc. So these might be natural, but you can't use them for chopping boards and things you can eat off. So find the right thing to do that. Then we use the processed oil. So this is the Danish oil finish. So this has got solvents and I added tongue oil, which is a seed, or linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, which is a seed as well, and dryers and stuff in there. So it's handy like a varnish. I'm going to push it on and pour it into something so you see it. Container. Questions about these ones? Anything you were wondering? So you can see that's actually really runny. It's actually really thin. But you've got that amber tone on. And so this one, you can wipe it off as well on the surface. That's going to be easy. I'll bring the surface to a cloth. So I use just to wipe it off. And the idea of this is you do leave this on the surface. Put it on quite liberally so that it really gets in there. Not stinky, doesn't smell of nice oranges. It's quite pungent, because obviously it's got solvents in, so it's got very high VOC, and you should really use a mask. So you leave it on the surface. Where are we there? That's it there, wet. And then you're going to wipe off the excess after you've left it to absorb. This one's quite thin, and there are lots of different recipes of Danish oil. So Danish oil, a bit different from teak oil or tongue oil. Teak oil is a blend as well. So teak oil is like a varnish. Tongue oil, linseed oil, and more natural oils. So this, you've got to be careful. If you leave it on the surface, it's going to dry to a sort of sticky residue. So 5 or 10 minutes later, you come back, depending on what the actual packaging says, because there's different formulations. You're going to wipe back the excess, leave that for the recommended time, and then keep adding on until you get to the finish you want, and the sort of luster that you want in time, waiting for the appropriate amount of time between. And then we've got, let's do fusion actually. Is anybody intrigued about this product? I've used it a couple of times, again, because it's quite smelly. Then I know it's on oil rag. Switching to tins really for the price of it as well. That's my personal opinion. Now, I wouldn't normally use these rubbish bushes, but the reason I'm using these rubbish bushes is because they're probably going to get thrown away. So I've just picked up my nasty ones, whereas you could use something obviously a little more easy to apply with, and obviously a better size for the surface when you apply it to. But this is a lot thicker consistency. This is, yeah, much more like a varnish, this. And as you can see, put that one on. Imagine it both sides, doesn't really matter. So, yeah, much more amber, a little bit thicker. Because it's thicker, it takes longer to absorb, so I'll leave it on the surface for longer. But as per Fusion's instructions, it's to be wiped back off paint immediately because it obviously starts to do something to it, which also says to me these products aren't protecting paint in the same way that a film forming coat would, as in a polyurethane. That's a really different colour. I mean, it looks nice in the woods. That's their clear as well. Obviously it's very amber. The white is completely yellow. So in 5 to 10 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to wipe back the excess, but off the paint, and we do it straight away. Because obviously it will start to interact with it. So we don't leave the excess on the surface to dry, it gets right back. So there's no film creating what I quite like from our customers is a wipeable surface. So they don't feel like, they can feel the ridges of design, or they're worried about if they're going to recoat in the future, do I recoat the paint or recoat just the wood? Yeah, that anyway. And then the last one is our Osmo, which is quite similar to SFO, except the stain and finishing also, except the wax content difference. And they're both designed for floors. So this, if you're not fussed about the oil smell, you're not fussed about not being painty over it, this is probably the quickest route to getting a really nice hard wax or a really nice nourished wood in the easiest way possible. But you have to recoat it with this in 3 years' time. Can you? If anybody wants to do tin products though. So they get that. Got a very different consistency, it's like jelly. And that's the wax in there. And the wax is the thing that's going to make it flexible with the wood. Although interestingly, you might be able to see this in the photograph when I share it with you, the one wood type, where are we? Here, that has split is this one. And you see the ripples there, it's split. So it's almost like it's lifted the wood, which I find quite interesting because it hasn't happened on any of the others. So, these are the things that we find out in time though, aren't they? You know, like we're sanding off chalk, paint, wax finishes, and let's just grab a brush. This one, so a nice sort of thin brushed on finish you can do, or you can roll with this as well. But you don't want to put too many layers on because it can build up and look a bit artificial. So it should just be thin painted layers or thin rolled layers. You can wipe it on as well. Actually, you can use like a pad to wipe it on. So very, very strong smell. So. And I didn't actually check what the recoat time is because they're all different. Do you see that sitting on the surface a bit more? So it does provide a little bit more of film coverage, but this is sissing back a little bit. I don't think I'd coated this or anything. There we go, says. Remind myself. 8 to 10 hours. Yeah, so it's they do rapid launches, I think 4 or 6, so you can get a slightly faster one. But yeah, you don't wipe that one back, just leave it on, but very, very thinly. Like so. So that's the difference. We'll picture up of that as well. So, Sharon's asking, let's just add it. If you're going to add a small amount of paint detailing on, say, a door, is it better to top coat the whole area with a layer or 2, then mask and paint? Or is it better to mask and paint before you ever put a top coat on? It's not to say that you couldn't put design on later on, but you're really looking at scuff sanding, I think, because your top coat, after your first coat, is penetrating the wood, so it's still going to be quite rough on the surface, so you could get away with it. That's why I say, if I've stained and I want to seal it, I'll put 1 coat of top coat on, and it's still going into the wood, it's not really coating the surface, so it's not going to stop your paint sticking. But more than that, I think you're going to risk your paint not sticking. So I tend to do my designs over bare wood. I'll do them over bare wood, and I only start to top coat afterwards. The only time I bring top coat is while I'm doing the taping is when I'm sealing the tape to stop something bleeding. But I normally put the top coat on beforehand. Unless, like I said, there's some stain in the picture and I'm trying to seal that in. But usually I can't think about whether we're doing stain or paint at the top. Maybe you do paint and stain in. Anyway, I wouldn't normally put the top coat down, and that's why I say with the shellac it needs to be sanded back to the wood so that you have a wooden surface but that has been sealed with product rather than seeing any shellac lying on the surface of even tape, because it's just too shiny for the paint to stick properly. So those are the essential products. I haven't included wax there. I just don't really see that that's a good product to be using, or we've got better options really. Not much shine on those, but obviously that you've got to build up your layers. So I can typically with the hard wax oil, the way that's brought out metallics, it will dull off a little bit as it dries. But they come in tints. So the processed oils come in tints, the hard wax oil come in tints that they want to sort of lighten, that they want to change the colour of your wood. Again, waxes, you've got like antique waxes and espresso waxes. I think where waxes can be a choice is to accentuate sort of decorative elements, but again, I still prefer the water-based sort of approach because it's more flexible. So, that's pretty much. Have got any more questions? Anything else you want to ask about or chat about? Okay. You need to drive really, so you could actually just sand and recoat on that. Tiny little dimple from the roller, but not too bad. I was going to use the white spirit, but to see what the colour difference is, it's actually quite good actually. Shall I be chancy and put the normal top coat on back and see what it looks. I might just do that before we go, and then if you want to ask any questions or if you've got anything you want me to pull out, I can. That's not used. So I can actually just do the back bit now. Just see what's not really miles away actually. But I will need to. And it's quite a good idea when you're doing your top coat to keep looking in the light as well, because as you can see there, you can sometimes run out of top coat and it leaves a little gap. So same with painting, you sort of. And then actually as you go along, you might also need to stand by with the paintbrush, just to, if you've got any bits that land on it. You can always sand them out as well, but that's definitely better, isn't it? I might just go a little bit more brown on a very dilute coat, because I think it's just a shade of difference. Just checking. And I tend to run my fingers around the edges to make sure there's nothing there as well. Dribbling down. See, something's just landed there. So grab a brush. I usually use the edges of a little brush. So just pick them up. And if you don't notice them in time, because they can sand them out. But quite pleased with how the shellac has changed the colour of these filled areas. I've not got a lot of touching up left to do there, really, which is good. Oops, just let that dry a bit too much. I shouldn't have gone over the top of that. So it doesn't look too bad in terms of colour. It's really invisible. Let's see. Oops. Okay. Quite pleased with that on the roof. So this is why I say, don't despair. There's always things we can do to adjust things. Right until the end. Right, let me just get my brain in gear here. Thinking about the top of my piece, I'd like to match those two areas with stained top coat, but still wanted to put a design on top of it. Yeah, no, there's quite a bit of this that kind of, you know, see me looking up in the air going, do this, just trying to work out the sequence of things. So yes, it's a very valid question, because there's times I think. So I will probably would have tried to fix it with stain first before I put design on, and then then thinking it through, if I put a multicolored design on, then I probably have to, and it might affect the colour of the stain. I'd have to seal the stain, so that one coat of top coat might help lock that if it was across the whole thing. For example, if I did like a gold fine line design and then wanted to top coat it, it could drag the stain over the gold, which with gold it might not actually look that bad, it might not be too bad. But yeah, one coat could just seal it in. Or back to the shellac, so you use your stain or shellac to adjust the colour. and then seal it with the shellac and sand it back, and then put your design on, and then top coat, because obviously the design would look slightly two-toned from what I just did there. I did it at the end, like so. Yeah. You might be able to do that adjustment that I've just done there with just by adding an extra layer of shellac, if your shellac's the right kind of shade, whereas I wanted to go a bit more brown and away from the orange. So I probably would have tried to do it with stain and then put shellac over the whole thing. Because the nice thing about the shellac is it just kind of unifies a bit. And it's also like, for example, when you've got this kind of, it's still not quite finished yet, this kind of damage on here, the shellac over the top of that will help blur the edges of that, the final coat of shellac, because that's only got one on. But if I'm still not happy with it, I could add a little bit into my top coat and go across it all, which would just help blur it as well. But yeah, if you're going for design, you wouldn't want to do half and half like that. So yes, does bear a bit of thinking through. I've got an infographic somewhere that I could share with you. I'm just trying to think if it's got shellac on it. It certainly has the sequence of applications with stain and tape and just sort of, if I do this and I do that sort of thing, because it is a bit like a flow diagram in your head, isn't it? Well, if I do that, I need to do this. So I'm pretty sure that it's got shellac on it. I'll definitely share it with you. Any other questions? If you're watching on catch up, do feel free to throw them in, because it's a massive subject area, and that's why I think having some sort of look-up lists and tables afterwards just to refer to can help make decisions. But if you just think, there's too much to think about, just stick to using polyurethane, water-based top coat, and if you've got really dramatic wood, put the shellac on beforehand, and if you've got just nice pale wood, I just put the top coat on, and just keep it simple. Give you a second to check. I know there's a bit of lag between me and where you are. Right. Well, I shall be continuing on with mine. In the meantime, in readiness for finishing touches next week. And so I'll be talking about, I'll be getting all my hardware out, having a look at it, making a decision, am I going to refinish it, looking at things like the hinges, the screws, other bits of finishing details like that, in terms of getting it all back together. I am looking at doing a little bit of design on the backboard that sits at the back of the top piece. I've still got some veneering to do, so I'll share that with you as I go through. But if you've got any specific elements on your piece in terms of fittings and fixtures or features that would be useful to cover in that finishing touches, please share a picture with me so that I can bring that in, because I can really talk about the features I've got on here. But specifically, we'll be thinking about putting things back together, screws and hinges and all those sort of tricky bits when you're at the end that can make you feel like chucking it on on fire, because it's they can be difficult bits, but hopefully I've got a few sort of ideas, things that will simplify, put things back together and show you about cleaning and refinishing the hardware that you've got. Although I'm not going to piece of mine, but I shall share that with you next time. Love to see your progress pics over to any questions you've got on your specific pieces in the group as and when. And otherwise, let's wind up there. And I will see you around the group. I'll see you on Thursday for the Q&A. Check that people are actually free for that, because I know it's Easter and we can always do it at an appropriate time if everybody's going to be up to these Easter eggs.
All right. I'll see you next time. And if you're watching on, do feel free to pop your questions on and I'll be able to answer them. And the supply list is in the group. The other materials will be very shortly, so keep an eye out for those. I'll catch you soon. See you later. Bye. Bye. See you soon. Bye, Shona. Thanks.